Right here. I think they're right here. So this is just there. So.
We have 3 minutes. You can still talk if you want. It's awkwardly quiet.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Indiana and Illinois should have been. Indiana was going to be always tough, but they were just sneaky though. Yeah.
Yes. Sorry.
Like from over here.
And my maiden name was Rosalina, so you're better off with safe. You're welcome.
My guys tell me we're good, so. Good evening, everyone. My name is Wayne Benna, and I am the Deputy Secretary of State for Elections. And I'd like to welcome you all here for this public forum. This meeting is subject to the open meeting laws of the state of Nebraska. Notice of this meeting was published in the Omaha World Herald, advising that a public hearing will be held on Referendum Measure 435 on this date at 6 p.m. at the Thompson Alumni Center. The copy of the notice will be made part of the public record and is hereby made part of the hearing record for this evening, including proof of publication from the Omaha World Herald. A copy of the open meetings laws are displayed at the easel to my right and on to your left. An agenda and materials prepared for the public in the form of an agenda and pamphlets are available at the door as you came in. The Secretary of State office is required by law to conduct this hearing for the purposes of comments from proponents and opponents and for members of the public on Referendum Measure 435 concerning private education scholarship partial referendum that will appear on the November 5th, 2024 general election ballot. Appearing with me this evening out in the front is Mia Sanderson, a UNO college student. She's there at the entrance. Will be happy to assist you with any information or questions. I'd also like to introduce our court reporter, Matthew Quinn, who will be making the official record of tonight's proceedings. This evening's hearing covers the 2nd Congressional District for Referendum 435. We were required to have a hearing on each ballot measure in each of the 3 congressional districts. I am not going to be acting as a judge where I make rulings on evidence or ruling on who's right or who's wrong. I'm serving as a moderator, according to law, to ensure that we have an orderly proceeding for the benefit of those in attendance and especially for the benefit of the court reporter. In a moment, we will have up to 10-minute statements from a recognized proponent and a recognized opponent of the referendum measure. After that, we will allow citizens to testify, alternating between proponents and opponents of the measure. When you came into the room, you were asked to sign in if you wish to testify. After the opening statements, I'll begin with those who signed in. After that, if there's time, I'll ask whether anyone who did not sign in wishes to testify. At this point, who intends to testify today by a show of hands? Okay. Given that, I will allow for 5 minutes of testimony from each testifier. I will reserve the right, if more people sign in as the course of the night goes on, to lower that to 3 minutes to make sure everyone has the ability to be heard. We will go until everyone has had a chance to speak, or we reach 8:40 p.m., whichever comes first. Afterwards, the recognized proponent and recognized opponent will give their closing statement. When I call you forward to testify, I'll ask you to come forward, state your name and spell it for the record, and state if you are testifying on behalf of an organization. This helps assure that the court reporter can accurately reflect your testimony. Now, for many of you, some of you, this may be the first time that you've spoken in front of a large body. This is also being live streamed on YouTube. Just make sure that you don't talk too fast. If you do, our court reporter may ask you to pause for a second, slow down, or he might ask you to clarify a word or a sentence that you used. You're not in trouble. Don't worry about it. It's just to make sure that we have an accurate record. I will be timing each testifier. We will need to be conscious of the fact that there are other people who want to testify and they need a reasonable chance to do so. I will notify you with 1 minute remaining with this very highly technical 1 minute sign. My team was horrified that I was just using a magic marker, so they made me this official sign. So, if you have a question, please write out your question and hand it to my team out front. We will look through them and try to raise the most pertinent questions with one of the recognized speakers when they make their closing remarks. Also required by law, the Secretary of State's office has produced an official pamphlet for each ballot measure. The pamphlets have the text, the ballot language, and arguments for and against each ballot measure as provided by recognized sponsors and opponents. We have a number of these available here tonight. This is the last hearing of all the hearings, so please take them all home because I don't want to. But you can take as many as you want back. Mia will be able to assist you. If you need more, pamphlets are available at the Capitol Office of the Secretary of State, at the Election Division at 13th and M Street in Lincoln, and each one of our county election offices across the state has copies of these. They're required to place them in 3 different areas within their communities as well. You can also download copies from our website, sos.nebraska.gov. A staff member can give you that site, and you can have it for reviewing or downloading this information yourself. At this time, I'd ask for you to check your cell phones, and I'm going to do it myself to make sure that we're on silent or off. We want to make sure some people have enough anxiety about speaking in front of people. We don't want to bother them with cell phones going off. With all of that out of the way, we will now hear from recognized proponents and opponents of this measure. And I will first invite Tim Royers to please come forward for the supporters of the referendum.
Good evening. My name is Tim Royers. I am the president of the Nebraska State Education Association, and I'm here as a sponsor of Ballot Measure 435 to speak in favor of voting to repeal Section 1 of LB 1402. Section 1 of LB 1402 would do something never seen before in the history of our state: direct public tax dollars to private schools. This has not happened because Article 7, Section 11 of the Nebraska State Constitution says public funds shall not be made to any school not owned or exclusively controlled by the state or a political subdivision thereof. 3 times before, this issue was raised with voters in a referendum: in 1966, 1970, and 1976. And in each of those 3 votes, the public rejected this idea. So now we are here again for a 4th time, because we feel the voters of this state should be the ones to fundamentally resolve this question of should public dollars go to private schools. Nebraska is the second to last state in the country to implement a private school voucher program. Therefore, we should look at the programs in those other states to see what kind of impact they have on learning and academic outcomes. And the results are consistent. Whether you are looking at states like Ohio, Louisiana, Arizona, Indiana, or others, not only do students who take vouchers do worse academically than if they had stayed in public school, the draining of funding from public schools also hurts the students who do not choose to participate in the system. According to a 2022 policy brief by Professor Lubienski that analyzed how those students did if they took a voucher to go to a private school, quote, "As voucher programs grew in size, the results turned negative, often to a remarkably large degree, virtually unrivaled in education research," end quote. Furthermore, an analysis by Indiana University Bloomington shows that public schools that have to go up against large voucher programs, quote, "see the most dramatic decrease in performance in the long term." So let's be clear. The first reason we urge you to vote repeal is because there is no meaningful evidence that this improves academic outcomes on a large scale. In fact, there is major evidence that indicates that in states with large voucher programs, all kids, those who stay in public schools and those who take vouchers to go to private schools, do worse academically. The second reason we urge a repeal vote on Measure 435 is because parents already have the ability to pick a school that meets their students' needs. It's called option enrollment, and we've had it in Nebraska since 1989. Option enrollment allows parents to apply to send their child to a school in another district, and the only criteria where a school can say no to that application is if that school is at capacity. On the other hand, private schools are free to deny admission for any reason. State lawmakers even tried to put basic non-discrimination protections into this program. Senator Hunt introduced an amendment that would have required any school receiving these public funds to comply with a very basic policy that would have prevented those schools from discriminating based on race, color, religion, national origin, ancestry, citizenship status, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, or special education status. That amendment failed with a 15-31 vote, and the state senators to my right all voted against those non-discrimination protections. So when parents already have the capacity to choose, and choose from publicly accountable schools that welcome all students, 1402's voucher program is fundamentally unnecessary. The third and final reason you should vote repeal on Measure 435 is because our public schools already have problems with adequate state funding, and this will make it worse. This school year, here are all of the Omaha metro districts that lost state funding. Bellevue Public Schools lost $1.5 million in state funding. Bennington lost $5.4 million in state funding. Gretna lost $6.3 million in state funding. Millard lost $10.1 million in state funding. And Papillion La Vista lost $7.6 million in state funding. So when you hear people say 1402 is only $10 million, ask the residents of those communities where those dollars could have been better spent. And make no mistake, LB 1402 would exacerbate those existing problems. The Legislative Fiscal Office, which provides the official cost estimates for all bills, noted in the earlier version of this program, LB 753, that, quote, "We do not anticipate school district expenditures to decrease relative to the reduction in students." Meaning, contrary to what our opponents will try and tell you, this does not save any taxpayer money. But furthermore, the report also indicated that, quote, "Some districts could receive a decrease in TIOSA equalization aid, resulting in a net reduction in total TIOSA aid of $11.8 million. So not only will this not reduce taxpayer expenses, it will further reduce state funding of our schools, which will force our schools to choose between cutting programs and staff or raising property taxes. The bottom line is this ballot measure is not just about next year. It's about the future. It's about 5 years from now, 10, 15, 20 years from now, because LB 1402 is designed to be a foot in the door to a much larger voucher program that will cost us hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And if you don't believe me, listen to Governor Pillen. In his testimony at a hearing last year, he said, quote, "We've got to beat Iowa. Iowa just committed $345 million a year to their budget for private schools. This is a step," end quote. The governor himself said, this is just a step. And again, we only need to look to other states to see what this means. Arizona's plan, for example, started off at around the same cost as Section 1 of LB 1402. And now it's cost that state nearly $1 billion. We fundamentally cannot afford to fund two school systems. Parents already have access to publicly accountable choice. And vouchers lead to worse academic outcomes for all students, whether families choose to participate in that system or not. For those and other reasons, we urge you to vote repeal on Measure 435. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll call a representative from the recognized opponents, Rick Bedker.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rick Bedker. I am the president and co-chair of the board of directors.
You spell your name, please.
I'm sorry, it's Bettger.
R-I-C-K for.
Sorry. As I said, I'm the president and co-chair of the board of directors of Opportunity Scholarships of Nebraska. We are a certified scholarship granting organization and also an administrator for the Education Scholarship Program created by LB 1402. I want to give voice to the students and families that this law is intended to help. They seem to get forgotten about as the union pumps money into our media outlets to spread misinformation about this law. First, let me begin by clearing up some of this. Number one, this is not a voucher program. I know that's a word they love to use, but this is a scholarship that students and families must qualify for under a very specific set of guidelines created by the statute. The intent of this law is to help families that would prefer to change the school environment for their kids, but financial constraints have prevented them from doing so. So let me give you some data. Applications for education scholarships under LB 1402 were taken from September 23rd until October 21st. During that time, we received 5,540 applications, of which 4,008 were verified as eligible for a scholarship. We received applications from every corner of the state, including Scottsbluff, Hastings, Kearney, North Platte, David City, Battle Creek, Norfolk, Columbus, Holdridge, South Sioux City, and I could go on. Of the students who will be awarded scholarships, over 2/3 of them come from families that receive free or reduced lunch, or 213% of the poverty level. And also, 84% of the money, $7.8 million, is going to families that received free or reduced lunch. This law is truly working as the legislature intended it to give low-income families another option. And we thank the 2/3 majority of our 49 state senators for providing a different opportunity for these families, some of whom you'll be hearing from soon. So let me head off a few of the arguments that are going to come up from the other side. And the first one is about accreditation and approval. Despite the ads of opponents of education freedom, all 215 schools eligible for this program are accredited or approved by the state of Nebraska. They must meet state standards to operate, and all their students take national norm-referenced tests. Most importantly, they are accountable to the families, because if they don't do the job well, the doors close. And that's why over 36,000 Nebraskans choose these accountable schools. The next one you'll hear is discrimination, and you'll hear them talk about non-public schools discriminate. Yet 40% of the opportunity scholarship recipients that we granted from LB 753 are now attending the school of their choice are students of color. It's also worth noting that the average ACT score for a student of color in Nebraska is 4 to 5 points higher in a private non-public school. And speaking of discrimination, a dozen of our scholarship recipients received scholarships because Nebraska public schools denied them enrollment in the state's option program. Without school choice, those kids who were denied option enrollment would be stuck in a school that doesn't fit their needs. Now, typically 12 to 14% of students in the non-public schools in Nebraska are students with special needs. It's worth noting that a top qualifier for our scholarship is special education, and we granted roughly 12% of the scholarships to students with IEPs. This means that not only are these accountable non-public schools serving kids with special needs, they're serving even more now. And with programs like LB 1402 being retained, this will only expand and give parents more options for their amazing children with unique needs. 70 of our opportunity scholarship winners qualified because they had a verified incident of harassment, bullying, or assault in a public school. Now, all schools work hard to provide a warm and welcoming environment, and bullying happens in private schools also, but that's not the point. The point is that a child has a chance at a fresh start when laws like LB 1402 are retained. Nebraska was the last state to pass some form of school choice for its parents in 2023. However, the concept of K through 12 education freedom has been in play in the United States for over 30 years, and it has flourished. It has not diminished. And tonight you'll hear the opponents rattle off arguments and stats about the dangers of school choice, but two questions remain. If school choice is such a terrible idea, why do we promote it and encourage it at every other age besides K through 12? If school choice is so bad, why does it always grow when parents discover it? There is data showing that where school choice is robust, public schools actually improve as they compete in the marketplace to meet the demands of the families they serve. And we know locally, since passing school choice in Nebraska, the state has made historic investments in public education. Which, by the way, brings me up to this latest ad from the union where the pretend state senators come into a kid's classroom and break their pencils and kick around the blocks and all that kind of such stuff. It's an interesting strategy. Mocking the same state senators that boosted your funding by $300 million in the last session. In fact, I just learned this afternoon that the union has spent $2.1 million so far in media buys during this insufferable campaign. Now, I didn't go to private school. I'm a proud grad of Millard High School, which should give away my age to some of you. I got involved in this fight as someone who wants to see better outcomes for our low-income families. I found a school system that's providing it. You're going to hear from the leaders of the Q school system right after me here, right here in Omaha. Of their 550 students, 100% of them receive free and reduced lunch, and 92% of them are students of color. Yet when their students go on to high school, they graduate at a rate of 90%. These families have found a better way for their children. And these stories exist all across the state. We need strong public schools, and we would never advocate taking money away from them. But that $10 million that doesn't even come from the public school budget, that the $3 billion that the legislature appropriates every year to public schools, it doesn't seem like a lot to ask when it's only for low-income families who are looking for a better way. So I encourage you all to vote to retain LB 1402. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to turn to members of the public who signed in. I'm going to alternate until we run out of one side or the other between proponents and opponents. Each testifier will have 5 minutes, and I'll let you know when they have 1 minute remaining. If you have written testimony, you can provide that to the court reporter afterwards so they can accurately reflect what you said during your testimony. If you have it on a phone or a tablet, Matthew will have his email address available, and you can email it to him as well. Completely optional, but it helps with the record just in case we miss something during any point. As I said before, when I have you come up, please speak, say your name, and spell it for the record. I will not start your time until you have finished spelling your name. And finally, just one thing of decorum. Please address all of your comments to me or the court reporter, please not to the members of the audience. If you need to leave for any portion of this, please use the back doors and not these front doors, as you'll probably get into the camera shot and you probably don't want that. So with that, we will start with supporters, and I will call up Dave. The final thing I need to say is, this is my 10th hearing, and I have found that my pronunciations can be suspect. With the last name of Benna, the first day of school was always very anxious for me of what the teacher was going to say, because it can be pronounced 6 different ways. So if I do get your name wrong, I do apologize, and please correct it on the record, and we'll go from there. So as I said at an earlier hearing, I realized why the state senators just have people walk up and not have to do this, because it gets a little bit a little overwhelming. So first off, we have Dave Richardson.
My name is Dave Richardson. Richardson is spelled Richardson. I'm a lifetime resident of Omaha, Nebraska. I'm a product of the Omaha Public Schools, and I am a retired public school teacher. And I'm proud to say that I taught for 40 years in 2 different public schools in the Omaha area. And I have a strong belief that LB 1402 will do irreparable damage to the quality of education provided by our public schools. 3 key points come to mind. First, proponents of 1402 claim it would provide, the supporters of 1402 claim it would provide school choice, especially for students from low-income families. And as Mr. Royers pointed out, we have school choice in the state of Nebraska. The school option law, whereby a parent can have opt their student into any other public school in the state of Nebraska, it's working. Most public schools welcome students from outside their attendance areas. They want to be net importers of students and not net exporters of students. For example, since the adoption of the school option law, over a third of the students attending District 66 schools, where I taught for 20 years, do not live in the district. They opt in, and no, they're not all football players. At Westside, 35% of the students now qualify for free and reduced price lunch. 38% of the students in total are option students. 32% of our students are non-white. The second area is, has already been mentioned, the Constitution of the state of Nebraska establishes that education is a right, not a privilege. Where direct subsidy of private school students, such as LB 1402 provides, have been tried in many states, it has caused severe disruptions fiscally and operationally in carrying out those rights, as well as some other unintended consequences. Where it has been tried, the typical private school student in Indiana and in Arizona, they have been attending that school for some time before the law came to be. So a lot of times it is just providing tuition to students who already go to school there in a private school. In a sense, it is a way of getting someone to pay your kids' tuition. My third point, the public schools are far more responsible to all stakeholders. Now, parents are stakeholders, of course, and the public schools recognize that. My own experience was I had some very good experiences working with parents of students who struggled, parents of students who succeeded in school, and basically we approach it as a team, not as just a single stakeholder, that being the parent. Parents are stakeholders. Students are stakeholders, and the duly elected school boards representing the tax-paying public and the entire community are all stakeholders. We help to build our community. We do not just serve a small minority of parents. People considering coming to Omaha to live often look first at the quality of the public schools. Please don't harm that great American institution, going back to the days of Horace Mann. Let's keep our community strong by supporting our public schools.
Thank you. Next, for opposition, we have Senator Justin Wayne.
Do I have to spell my name? Justin Wayne, Justinwayne. I represent Legislative District 13. I know I was looking at you, giving you see how fast I was going. 13, which is North Omaha and North Douglas County. Irreparable harm. Irreparable harm is exactly why I support or oppose to, in this case, oppose to repeal this, because it is irreparable harm to children that we cannot fix. First of all, let me say I was to the right of the individual of the union who said that those senators to the right did not vote for the discrimination amendment. I voted for it, which is one of the many lies that I continue to hear from the NSCA on this issue. We have a choice today of whether we protect institutions or protect children. And that has been the fight that I have waged in the 8 years I've been in this legislature, everything from school funding to holding schools accountable when they sexually abuse or fail to intervene sexually abused children. Irreparable harm. What do we tell the parent in North Omaha who has no choice? Irreparable harm is not $10 million coming from the state, because the other lie that was said is we don't do direct appropriations to private schools. That is a direct lie. We have lunch programs that go through state funding. We have books exchange programs that go to private schools that have direct funding. And in fact, we have grants that went to Creighton Prep, Duchesne, and I can keep naming a list of other schools that go to East Omaha that were directly appropriated to those institutions. Because we as a state are trying to do what's best for all kids, not just selected kids. See, the problem is I was on the school board and we thought we can make some fundamental changes. But after 15 years of trying to help a student, I've watched a student start in kindergarten and graduate and not be able to get a job because they were still reading at the 6th grade level. I've watched that parent try over and over to send their child to a different school, but didn't have real choice because that student had an IEP, which is the first question that is asked by Westside and every other school on their form. The fact of the matter is we are leaving out the one individual we should be talking about, the student. We continue to talk about institutions and everybody else, but the student who may need something else. You think $10 million from the state is going to cause irreparable harm? How about the 3 schools who do not have special education inside of OPS that are in North Omaha because we couldn't adequately fund teachers and special education teachers? While at the same time, the school board who elected to lower their property taxes over the last 10 years, 9 out of 10 years, while we can't properly fund education. Where is the union on that? Where is the union when I introduced bills to outlaw discrimination at the public school and hold public schools accountable last summer, and they stood silent? They were silent, didn't even show up. And in fact, the consortium wrote a letter against the bill. See, it's easy to talk about the boogeyman coming to get you, but it's hard to talk about the kid and the parent who is looking for a choice, an option. You want public option? Great. Do you want to talk about how Westside gets $11,500 per student while Omaha North only gets $5,500? How the state is picking winners and losers? But when I bring bills to change that, the union is silent, and so is most public education institutions. This is a civil rights issue. You think education is a right, and I agree with you, sir. But what happens if that right is not being fulfilled or is completely denied? Should we wait for government to catch up and lose another generation of kids? Or should we use every tool that we can to provide an opportunity for that parent and that child to get the high quality education they deserve? I was against school choice 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 7 years ago. But my last 5 years, I'm out of options. And the kid in North Omaha needs an opportunity. That parent needs that choice. So that's why I would ask you to vote to retain 1402. Thank you.
Thank you. Next for proponents, Jane Erdenberger. And feel free to move that, the thing of you.
My name is Jane Erdenberger, and it's very easy. Erdenberger. Pick a vowel and you've got it. Thank you very much for hosting this last of many hearings. I really appreciate it. I want to encourage Nebraskans to support Nebraska's outstanding public school system and vote to repeal LB 1402. A law that diverts millions of precious public dollars to private school scholarships. My life experiences, 5 of which I'm going to share with you, support my authority on this position. First, as a taxpayer, we're told that an unusually large amount of money, and it's true, I'm not saying that it didn't happen, came to public schools through the legislature, and that the money that is going to the LB 1402 program is not out of the education fund. I would like to point, and we keep hearing that it's only 10 million compared to 3 billion, so, no big deal. Again, it only starts as 10 million. The bill itself is designed to grow to at least 100 million, and based on the experiences in other states, several 100 million. I think the number in Arizona was over $1 billion. Those are state dollars that could be used to fund the public schools that currently educate 90% of all Nebraska students and the staff and communities who rely on those public schools. Speaking of which, private schools do not even exist in 48 of our 93 counties. We may be getting applications from all over the state, but I'm not sure what private school those students are going to end up in. Funds that are supposed to be public will not even be available for private schools in over half of our counties. My second life experience is as a lawyer. While practicing law at QTAC Rock for 22 years, focusing on public bond financing and securities law, it might suggest that I'm smart, but I will readily admit that it does not make me a constitutional scholar. However, I do know that the Nebraska Constitution provides that, notwithstanding any other provision in this Constitution, appropriation of public funds shall not be made to any school or institution of learning not owned or exclusively controlled by the state or a political subdivision thereof. And state law, a case held in 1974 that no appropriation or grant of funds shall be made to an educational institution which is not owned or controlled by the state, and an act which indirectly benefits private institutions through public grants to students is unconstitutional. That is State XL Rogers v. Swanson, 192 Nebraska 125, 219 Northwest 2nd, 726, 1974. My third experience is as a teacher. To become a teacher at Omaha North High School for the 16 years after I left the law firm, I had to pass entry exams, complete required courses, be the oldest student teacher in a school of judgmental teenagers, and get and maintain my state-mandated teaching certificate. It absolutely defies logic that we would use precious state funds on schools. While approved, that does not mean they are required to employ state-certified teachers. As a public school teacher, I administered tests required by the Nebraska Department of Education, and those publicly available test scores and graduation data and everything else you can think of, from staff salaries to discipline records, are used to compare and evaluate public schools and school districts across the state. Private schools are not required to provide that data. It is indefensible that private schools receiving tens of millions of public funds will not be held to the same public accountability and comparison standards. I loved teaching at Omaha North High School and having the opportunity to model the importance of inclusion and respect for diversity. Public schools accept all comers. I recognize and am concerned about the amendment that failed. I appreciate Senator Wayne's vote, but nonetheless, the only criteria we're hearing of is poor children of color. There were a lot of other children of diversity described in that amendment, which, for whatever reason, the supporters of LB 1402 did not think should be included in the requirements for the schools that are receiving those public funds. Even our students.
You have to wrap up. It's your time.
Say what?
I need you to wrap up your remarks.
Okay, fine. So finally, I am also a board member on the Omaha Public Schools. I'm not representing the board, but I can report we do not support LB 1402, and that we had legislation in the last session to fund a pipeline of teachers, specifically more special ed teachers. As noted by Senator Wayne, we now have special ed teachers in all of our schools, lest there be some confusion about that. And I can't believe that not enough money was found to finance that legislation, but was found to finance private schools. Thank you very much.
And next for opponents, Tia Houston.
Hello, it's Tia, T-I-A, and then Houston, H-O-U-S-T-O-N.
Whenever you're ready.
By putting LB 14 on the ballot, you also put my children's livelihood on the ballot. And when I say my children, I'm not just talking about the children that are in my household. I'm talking about the children I work with, the children in the community. I'm talking about your children, our children. Now, I've always been pro public schools. My mom, she worked at a public school for 30 years. My oldest daughter went to a public school. I attended a public school. I even had a child later on in life, and she ended up, going to a public school. But then, like life always throws some kind of monkey wrench in your plans, I ended up adopting a little girl. Now, when I adopted this little girl, it was a no-brainer. We were all going to a public school. She was going to go to a public school. But what happened was I sat there and I watched my daughter struggle. And what I mean by struggle, my daughter was in the second grade. She could not recognize her letters. She could not count past 50. She would come home crying, saying that these children are bullying her. She didn't want to go back to school. She used to pretend to be sick just so that she wouldn't have to go to school. Like, I could not take it anymore. But it's not like I have had too many choices. I live in North Omaha. I'm a low-income parent. I tried to get her into Ralston, but like when I tried early, like fall, they were at capacity by time December had come. So the only other choice I had is I had to try the little private school around the corner. And that was Sacred Heart. But when I went to Sacred Heart, just day one, I was greeted with the student services director. And he was asking me, is there anything I can help you with? Let's try to get your scholarship paid for. Do you have food at home? Do you need anything? And I'm just like, wow, no one has ever tried to help me like that. And because I didn't have to worry about food, I didn't have to worry about paying tuition, then I could really have that time and focus on my daughter. So then I didn't have to work 2 or 3 jobs. I could come home, we could work on homework, we could read books. I could sit there and just have that one-on-one time and, tell her I love her, just get that encouragement. And then literally 6 months, my daughter was thriving. She was reading at a third grade level. She started adding, subtraction. She was starting to do multiplication. And I'm like, oh my God, this is all it took was for her to go to a school that was small, be able to go to a school that have supports like Boys Town, who have supports like Student Services to help with finances. This school fit her needs, and that's just what she needed at the time. So then I end up having a son, and I'm like, okay, we're thriving. We're on this roller coaster, we're going. But my son's situation was not quite the rodeo. We're actually kind of dealing with it right now. I just been so depressed. I'm like, I don't know what's going on with my son. I'm crying. He's going to school. He's flipping chairs. He's cussing out teachers. And I'm like, hey, I'm a parent. I'm doing the best that I can. And finally, one day, the student services reached out and it was like, can we help you with things? Is everything okay? And I'm like, no, my son is driving me crazy. I don't know what's going on. Like, he needs some type of help. The principal of the school said, you know what? I will go with you to the doctor. Let's see what's going on. The teacher sat with me on the phone the whole time we were at the doctor, and we got a plan. Yes, everything's not perfect, but like I feel supported. Like we have a plan. My son is doing much better. He hasn't been, sent to the principal office. So again, this is a school that fits their needs. And again, like I said, I don't have too many opportunities because of just my income and where I live. So I know this is like election is getting close and you probably already made your decision, but I really want you to think about when you go to those polls. Who are you really hurting? And who can you help? Remember, these are just not my children. These are our children. Please vote to retain LB 1402.
Next, we have Timothy Melcher.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Timothy C. Melcher, Timothy, C as in Clifford, M as in Mike, Elcher, and I'm here to testify in support of the repeal measure. So I grew up on a farm about 8 miles south of Battle Creek. Technically, Meadow Grove was our address, but Meadow Grove is too small to have a school. And my oldest brother had the privilege of going to District 88 before all the country schools were consolidated. So I went to a parochial school in Battle Creek until 8th grade, and then I went to a parochial school in Norfolk. And the biggest issue that I saw with the parochial school system is how they're able to discriminate. There were fellow students in the grades above me who it was obvious they were gay, but the teachers talked them into the closet so that they wouldn't be expelled. And I had mentioned in previous testimony that I moved out when I was 16. And it was due to my mother's drinking and my dad's absence. But my sophomore year at the private school, I had confided in a teacher about what was going on at home. And she reached across the table and said, "Why don't you pray about it?" And I just looked at her because what went through my mind is I don't need God right now. I need an attorney. And so I was paying my own tuition. I had a job. I was able to drive because I lived in the country. So I was driving since I was 14. But I was paying for a school that could expel me for being who I am. And so when I got the opportunity, I decided to go to a public school. So that is my main opposition that is my main support for the repeal measure, because I don't want public funds going to a school that can expel somebody for being who they are. And that concludes my testimony. Oh, and one more thing, I wanted to note something that Jane Erdenberger didn't get to in her testimony is how frustrating it is that the chance to vote on this was taken away from us and that we had to come back and do this again. but persistence pays off. So here we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Christina Qualla.
My name is Christina Qualla, Christistina. Last name CHV as in Victor, ALA. This is my daughter, Olu. She is a freshman this year at Duchenne. I have another daughter, Leela, who is in 7th grade. As recipients of the Opportunity Scholarship this year, 435 and LB 1402 to us are synonymous with hope. I have been a single parent for over 10 years. It has just been the three of us. It's not my fault that my daughters are part of a single parent household with a single parent income. It's not my daughter's fault that I'm not earning what I need to earn in order to have them be in the learning environment and community that is best for their individual needs. Olu's had some encounters in the past with racism and with sexism. However, this year at Duchenne, in the all-girls environment that they have provided for her, she is thriving. That is not something that she can find, unfortunately, in the public school system right now. Duchenne's freshman class also mirrors the diversity in the Omaha metro area, and she is thriving as a woman of Southeast Asian descent in that as well. As her mom, I recognize that this community and environment was where she was meant to be, but I had no idea how I was going to make that possible. Regardless, Olu went ahead and she shadowed at Duchenne too, and she recognized that that was something that, a place where she belonged as well. Her way of problem solving that was to work as hard as she possibly could in middle school to earn an academic scholarship, which she did. When she found out that that still wouldn't cover the cost of private school tuition, at 13 years old, my daughter came to me and asked me how she would go about finding a job to help provide for that tuition. Another thing that I think is important that you should know about Olu is that she is also a very talented and committed athlete. So when she asked me that question, that meant that she was going to have to decide between two of her goals, whether or not she was going to play college lacrosse or whether she was going to be able to be in the environment that she had set her heart on. That was good for her academically, that was good for her mental health, that was good for everything, where she personally as an individual fit. What the education scholarships did was give her back a little part of her childhood and allow her to keep both dreams. We still receive a financial aid package from the school, and we still sit down and we make our sacrifices and we budget in order to make our monthly tuition payments as a family. But my daughter also still gets to focus on both of her dreams, both of her academics and her sports, and so she is able to put those goals toward getting a college scholarship. Retaining 435 is Nebraskans saying with their actions and not just their words that this beautiful girl sitting next to me, that her vision, her hopes, her goals, her mental health, and her dreams are worthy of investing in. That's powerful. If 435 is repealed, the message my daughters will see is that we as a state decided that their individual needs and dreams and goals are not worth investing in, and that they are going to have to do this alone. Another thing that I think is very important to mention with previous testimony is that we just found out yesterday that my daughter has been part of the highest honors for quarter one, and she is within the top 10. We can't figure out whether she's 5, 6, or 7 because she was shadowing that day or hosting a shadow that day. If Referendum 435 is repealed, my daughters might no longer have a parent at their games, a parent to drive them to practices or at their dinner table, because it does mean that I have to pick up another job or two to make their dreams happen. If 435 is repealed, it means my daughters and I must make impossible choices that aren't really choices. Choice should not be the luxury of the few. A teen's opportunities should not be limited by their parents' circumstances. Please don't send my daughters the message that their needs no longer matter and that they are no longer worthy of this investment. Please don't take this away from us. Please retain 435.
Thank you. Next, Joy Katharima.
Good evening. My name is Joy Katharima, JoyKathurima, and I'm here on behalf of the ACLU of Nebraska in support of the repeal of Section 1 of LB 1402. In addition to doing little to improve student performance and being vastly unpopular, vouchers like the one passed under Section 1 of LB 1402 undermine the separation of church and state. Voucher schemes shift millions of taxpayer dollars from public schools, which are open to all, regardless of faith, to private schools, the vast majority of which are religious. In turn, taxpayer funds directly support religious instruction. What's more, these schools are often not required to comply with many academic standards and can discriminate, for example, by excluding students on the basis of religion, sexual orientation, or disability. The principles of religious liberty undoubtedly mean that parents may choose to send their children to private religious schools. They should not, however, allow for religious education to be provided at taxpayers' expense. For these reasons, the ACLU of Nebraska supports the repeal of Section 1 of LB 1402. Thank you.
And next, we have Jim Swanson.
Good evening. My name is Jim Swanson, JIMSWANSON, and I serve as the Director of Student and Family Support for the CUES school system, Sacred Heart, Holy Name, and All Saints. At CUES, we provide wraparound support for our students and our families. You heard from Tia a few minutes ago. The CUES school system provides tremendous support beyond the classroom for our students. We know that if a home is not stable, it is very difficult for a young person to be able to focus on school and learn. We take a completely holistic approach to educating a student. We connect our students and families to our community partners, and we continue to follow them through the process. If a referral to one of our partners does not work out for a family, we stay with them and we try the next option. I think this is where the CUES school system differs from others. We are relentless with love for our families, and we go beyond the call of duty to wrap them in this love and support. Upon graduation, we continue to follow our students into high school and beyond. Over the past 6 years, 90% of our CUES grade school graduates have gone on to graduate from high school. With the demographics that we serve, as we talked about, 92% students of color, 100% receiving free and reduced lunch. Our parents represent 22 different countries. 43% of our parents were born in another country, and they represent 22 countries, mainly Central Africa, Central and South America, and Burma. From the high school graduating class of 2023, which would be the CUES graduation class of 2019, 34 of our 44 CUES graduates chose to pursue college at the 2-year or 4-year level. These students have continued on to their sophomore year at a rate of 85%. This includes schools like the University of Southern California, Boston College, Creighton University, Iowa State, University of Nebraska, Omaha, Marquette, University of Nebraska, Lincoln, and the list goes on. These young CUES graduates are thriving. We are convinced it is because of our excellent preparation in grade school and the continued wraparound support throughout their high school career and into their college career. To show the level of commitment that the CUES school system has, my colleague Jacques and I have been on the front porch or in the living room of over 110 of our families in the past 5 years. At CUES, we meet our families exactly where they are, and we do our best to help a family meet its basic needs and to move forward in their lives. Let me give an example. A young Sudanese woman living as a single mom needed support to be able to get to work and to get her kids to school. She needed transportation. CUES helped her buy a car. Financially, I put her in touch with a mechanic who looked at the car over, and we helped her buy the car. She worked with 2 of our community partners to help her move forward. She completed the Omaha Bridges Getting Ahead class at our encouragement. She also worked with the Boys Town Care Coordination Program that we partner with. I even met with her and the Boys Town worker at her home. We supported her in finding a job as a paraprofessional at one of our CUES schools. She is working towards her college degree. It was not just the excellent education at CUES she needed for her kids and her family. She needed support outside of the school hours to come in and walk with her in her desire to move herself and her kids forward. CUES is a small school system. The relationships between students, parents, and families are personal and go far beyond the classroom. That is the key. As small schools with very personal and deep support, our families flourish at a very high rate. The talent, intelligence, and desire is there for our kids and our families. They benefit from our support and encouragement to reach their goals. One final example. One of our parents has struggled in many ways. Currently, she has an autoimmune condition that prevents her from working. She is waiting to receive disability benefits. This can take months or years. We support her and her family in every way. We have helped with transportation, food, counseling, love, scholarships, and encouragement as she waits for the disability support. All 3 of her children graduated from a CUES school. I have followed the children through high school and into college. One is on her way to graduating from college this year. One started college this year, and the third is thriving in high school, playing football and getting great grades. Students and families at the CUES school system, Sacred Heart, Holy Name, and All Saints receive more than an education. They receive a lifetime of support, encouragement, and love. Please vote to retain LB 1402. Thank you.
Okay, this is the first trip up of the night, so I'm just going to say last name Blakely because it could be Dana, okay, because I was going to go Dave, and now we're good.
I have terrible writing. I'm Dana Blakely, DanaBlakely. Not only have I been a proud Nebraska public school teacher since 1999, I'm also a longtime local Board of Education member, so my perspective is somewhat unique and my comments are my own. I'm urging voters to repeal 1402. I've watched the national evolution of school vouchers with great interest and vigilance for years. The results of these vouchers have been at best questionable. The economic impact has been, in a word, disastrous. I couldn't be more proud to work for and on behalf of Nebraska's public schools. To that end, I've spent countless hours over the last 2 summers ensuring that the voters could have the final say on the issue of vouchers in Nebraska. I teach high school government, and as such, I am tasked with instilling in my students a sense of civic responsibility, the belief that their votes are important, and the understanding that a state's lawmakers work to represent the people. Any chance we have to hear directly from our citizens is a gift that our policymakers should value, not suppress. As a board member,
I have serious concerns about a large amount of taxpayer dollars going to institutions that have no accountability nor transparency. Twice a month, I meet to provide leadership to a $100 million organization with 6,000 students. In doing so, our agenda must be made available to the public, our expenditures voted on, and our meeting door open to any and all. Though the rules of public meetings may be a little bit cumbersome at times, I welcome the openness of the process. Because we are using taxpayer dollars, the taxpayers deserve to know what we are doing with them. Vouchers take dollars away from the public view and accountability. It will start with $10 million, but as other states have shown us, this number increases. Additionally, we have the privilege of teaching all students. All means all, regardless of income, ability, or need. We don't select the students that come to us to learn. We create the educational environment that those students need in order to learn. Nebraska's public schools are strong. Administrators, teachers, and educational leaders work every day to ensure that ongoing strength while also working to continuously get better. I will continue to work to ensure that our public schools offer a quality education to all Nebraska students. The very best way to do this is by keeping public dollars in public schools. Thank you.
Next, we have Terry Bush.
Good evening. My name is Terry Bush, Terribush, and I'm the Chief Academic Officer for the CUES school system. The CUES Fund is a nonprofit organization supporting 3 schools: All Saints on 10th and William, Holy Name, 2900 Fontenelle Boulevard, and Sacred Heart, 22nd and Binney. We presently serve over 580 students pre-K through 8 across all 3 of our campuses. A couple facts. All 3 of our schools are accredited through NCEA, National Catholic Education Association, and Rule 10 through NDE. Our average class size is 16. 65% of our students are not Catholic. 100% of our students receive free and reduced lunch. 100% of our families qualify for financial education assistance. 7% of our students receive special education services from OPS. 92% of our students are of color. As Mr. Swanson said, 43% of our CUES parents were born outside of the United States. We work tirelessly every day to ensure that our students are receiving equitable and holistic educational opportunity. Our teachers have proven positive results that come with a cost to educate of $13,700 per student annually. The majority of our parents can only contribute approximately 5% towards our cost to educate. There's a gap that needs to be filled. Please understand that our families choose our schools because they want to provide the very best education possible. For a lot of them, that means going above and beyond to make it better for their kids than it was for them growing up. Lastly, no child is turned away due to the inability to pay. We surround our students and families with amazing resources, included but not limited to a partnership with Boys Town, a partnership with Madonna, partnerships with before and after school programs at no cost for our families, North Star, Girls Inc., Completely Kids, and Hope Center. We offer one-to-one blended learning opportunities. We have a committed board of governors who are all educators. And we are grateful to our OPS special education teachers and their dedication to our students. As I ask to retain 435, you might say why. It would ensure that the resources I have shared remain a part of the blueprint to our educational process. It will allow us to remain competitive with teacher salaries, and it would mean that we are creating and ensuring an even playing field for the most neediest kids in our community with scholarship opportunities. This is not about taking money away from our public school colleagues. It is about equitable educational opportunities for all students in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Wes Jensen.
Wes Jensen, Wesjensen. I speak to Nebraskans asking them to vote repeal on Measure 435 to repeal Section 1 of LB 1402. And as an educator who is currently in public schools, I want Nebraskans to know this is not an issue against private schools and public schools. I've had the pleasure of working in private schools here in Nebraska for 9 years, and I'm currently in year 6 or 7 in our public schools here in Nebraska. And I enjoyed both experiences. And in fact, I still donate to the private school that I taught at for 9 years because I love what they do and I love how they support students and families. But I also think it's important to know our public schools do just that as well. So this isn't an issue between private and public schools. This is an issue of, does Nebraska want public money going to non-public schools? Schools that have different requirements, schools that are not accountable to the public. Should our tax dollars go to them? And if they're not going away from our public schools, then I guess they're going away from public safety, because that's another big contributor or beneficiary of our state's general fund. So it's either taken from our public schools or it's taken from public safety. I don't know which one it is, but it's got to come from somewhere. And I think we just need to, there's been a lot of talk about, oh, well, they're accredited or they're approved schools. Yes, they absolutely are. But there's one major difference. And I love hearing that private schools across Nebraska are, having special education departments. That wasn't the case when my family went to private school and my brother and sister who needed special education services couldn't get it. And the reality is they're not required to do that. And at the end of the day, even if they have them, guess who ensures that that student is getting the services they need? The public schools. So at the end of the day, let's keep public money in our public schools where they are held accountable and that they truly do serve all students, especially all of our special education students. Thank you.
Next, we have Senator Kathleen Kauth. Senator Kathleen Kauth, you're up next.
Sorry about that. My name is Kathleen Kauth, Kathleen Kauth. I'm the senator for Legislative District 31, the Millard area. And I'd like to say I also sit on the Revenue Committee. So I see all of these bills that come through. I got to tell you, the hysteria and the hyperbole that is being thrown out is absolutely extraordinary. When I hear people tell me that this tax credit will destroy public schools, I have to wonder what people are thinking. We spend $4.5 billion a year on public schools. The option enrollment costs the state $123 million each year so that kids within a public school system can move to a different public school system. And yes, the receiving public school system can say, yeah, we're full, we can't take them. It doesn't always work, but yet we spend $123 million every year on it. We are talking about a $10 million grant. We give money from the state to a variety of different nonprofits, non-public entities throughout the state receive state funding. It is extraordinary to me that we have so much focus on saving the system. And when I see those nice shirts that say support our schools, SOS, all I can think is I'd rather they said support our students. We have kids who do not do well in a public school system. It's not their fault. But we are responsible as a state to educate every child. That's our responsibility, not to educate them in a public school specifically, but to make sure that every child gets an education. In 2022, in the Revenue Committee, 2023, in the Revenue Committee, we sat and heard from public school teachers and the public school administrators talking about this bill, or the Opportunity Scholarships bill, claiming that it would destroy everything that they were trying to do. Dr. Cheryl Logan from OPS sat there, and I did ask, tell me about your school scores. And she didn't want to say that their math proficiency was 16%, that their science proficiency was 21%, and their reading proficiency was 22%. By all metrics, that is failing those students. I think that each kid deserves a chance to find the place that fits them best. And my kids went to Millard. Millard has done a phenomenal job. My kids did great. They had Mr. Royers. They loved him. Not every kid does well in every situation. Our goal is to educate every child. We need to make sure that for the ones who it doesn't work in the public schools, that they have the opportunity to go to a private school that fits them best. And I love the fact that we have someone from Duchesne who came and said, you know what? I needed that all-girls environment. You can't get that in a public school. But that's what that particular student needed. And parents and their kids deserve the chance to go and find what fits them best. You only have a very small amount of time for kids to get the education that they need. They grow very quickly. For them to have to sit and wait, and you heard Senator Wayne talking about it, about watching students struggling for years as the system fought around them about what was best for the system, and those children were failing. Now, from a more financial aspect, when we talk about the property taxes and we talk about school funding, there's a little misnomer there. TIOSA is our school funding formula, and it is incredibly complex and difficult, but at its base, it means needs minus resources gives you what the state will provide. When our valuations go up, those resources look like there's a whole lot more. So when you hear Mr. Royer saying, well, the state is no longer funding schools at certain levels, what that means is the property values in that area went up significantly. Thank you. And the state no longer has in that formula the ability to pay. We worked very hard during the special session this summer to come up with a way to take some of the burden off of property owners so that the state could fund more for the public school system. And the majority of the senators who are voting to repeal 1402 voted against doing anything that would help public schools receive more state funding. So all of this seems, again, hysteria and hyperbole, and not focusing on the most important thing, which is the student. So I ask that you retain 1402. Thank you.
Next, we have Linus Stover.
Hello, my name is Lina Stover, Linastover. Clearly a parent, as the two children behind me are sitting. I'm also an educator, a sociologist, and I have focused my research on inequality and education. So I'm concentrating as a sociologist on the systems and not the individual, because the systems help the group of individuals. We ought to support institutions and systems that serve all students in Nebraska. I want to encourage Nebraskans to vote repeal on LB 1402. I am opposed to use of public funds to pay for private schools. Now, I want to encourage everyone to support private schools with their private funding. You hear an accent, I'm from Colombia. I've been a citizen for a few years now, and in Colombia, There is two systems of education, private schools and public schools. Private schools is what you ought to have because the public school system is simply not reliable. Public school system is for the poor of the poor of the poor. Here I am talking about the poor of the poor of the poor should have an outstanding education in the public school systems, like we do. So I am actually a graduate from private education, from Duchesne Academy in Colombia, or the equivalent of so. Now, how did I fund that education? With scholarships. Outstanding academic achievement, and private donors that supported my education. So I encourage many private citizens to please support the private school systems because they do serve a niche of education. But let me concentrate on the majority of children that are now coming to Nebraska as children of immigrants. They are served by the English language programs, which are costly and offered by the public schools when funding is available. There are still many public schools in Nebraska that do not offer an English language learners program. And we need to concentrate on giving them the funding so they can offer these programs. Schools are the integrative institution of newcomers into our communities. And English, the most basic barrier for many families that are new to Nebraska, is one of those benefits that people are getting, hopefully, through the public school systems. We should not depend on the private sector to offer this important benefit for all members of society. We must continue to support schools so they serve the students that fall out of the normal curve, and we should not treat students as exceptions and put them in exceptional schools, and only a few will benefit from those exceptions. We should make public schools that serve all students outstanding and use public funding to make sure that that happens. Thank you.
Next, we have Philip Gray.
Good evening. Appreciate this opportunity. My name is Philip Gray, P-H-I-L-I-P, sorry, I go by Phil, Gray, G-R-A-Y. I'm a parent of an adult special needs son. In fact, my son was in the first class allowed to go to public schools under the Education of All Children, the Handicapped Children's Act. Prior to that time, like the current situation with private schools, the public schools could deny our children if they felt they were inappropriate for their classrooms. And so with that as a background, I come to this as the second vice president of the ARC of Nebraska, and I'm representing the ARC of Nebraska. We are the state's largest membership organization for people with disabilities and their families. I'm here to express serious concerns with the Opportunity Scholarship Act and its potential impact on Nebraskans, particularly individuals with disabilities and their families. At the ARC of Nebraska, we advocate for the rights of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and believe strongly in a fair and inclusive education system that serves all students. First, it's important to recognize the overwhelming public opposition to this policy. 86,000 signatures from Nebraskans across 60 counties, many signing for the second time. The people of Nebraska have clearly expressed their concern. Nebraskans want decisions about the use of public funds for education to be made democratically and transparently, rather than through rushed legislation that was bypassed by vote. This response demonstrates a desire for public funds to be used for the benefit of all students, not just select few. As an organization that represents the disability community, we hear daily from families across the state who struggle with under-resourced public schools, which was mentioned earlier. In urban centers, students with disabilities often face significant challenges due to staffing shortages, with some schools lacking even a single special education teacher. I'm sorry.
Could you repeat the last sentence?
Oh, sure. Let me start from the top. As an organization that represents the disability community, we hear daily from families across the state who struggle with under-resourced public schools. In urban centers, students with disabilities often face significant challenges due to staffing shortages, with some schools lacking even a single special education teacher. In rural areas, the lack of support is even more dire, often leaving students with disabilities in unsafe situations. With these ongoing issues in our public schools, it is simply irresponsible to divert public funds to private institutions that are not universally accessible. When proponents argue that this policy provides an educational fit for every child, it's important to note that public schools are bound by federal laws like the IDEA, the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, to serve all students and meet individualized education requirements. Private schools under the Opportunity Scholarship Act are under no such obligation to meet these specific requirements. Listing students with individualized education programs, IEPs, as a priority category is performative at its best, as these private institutions can and still deny admission, remove students who need more support, or avoid providing services required by law in public schools. Without mandatory adherence to the IDA or Section 504, the Opportunity Scholarships lack real protection for students with disabilities. Public education is a cornerstone of equal opportunity in America. It offers every child the chance to access a complete, compliant, and comprehensive education. Diverting public funds to private schools undermines this promise and threatens the integrity of the education system that serves the majority of Nebraska families. We urge voters to consider the long-term impact on our education system of the Opportunities Education Act and support ballot initiative 435. Public funds should be used to uplift the entire education community, ensuring that every child has access to a fair, inclusive, and equitable education. Thank you.
And next we have Tamara Bailey.
It's actually pronounced Tamara.
Okay.
Tamara, middle initial M, Bailey. I am grateful for the opportunity to share my thoughts and opinions about the repealing of LB 1402. I am Tamara M. Bailey, a retired educator and a Douglas County taxpayer for over 41 years. I was raised by a single parent who stressed the importance of education to all her children and grandchildren because education past 6th grade was denied to her. That was her motivation to ensure that her children got educated. While collecting signatures over these past 2 years, I did take the time to read over the requirements for receiving the opportunity grant. I noticed that this law is specifically geared toward the lowest of low-income households, along with other households that have young people who have bullying issues at their current school, only to name a few. In my opinion, it is deceptive to put forth a law that lures low-income parents to believe that going to a private school will give their children a better education. Both public and private schools have expectations for their students. One major difference between public and private is that private schools could enforce parental and student participation in school a lot more firmly than teachers in the public schools. I believe all parents have a right to have their children educated in a school of their choosing. They should know how they will pay for a private school education without using public tax dollars. Why am I in agreement to the repeal of LB 1402? Taking public dollars and sending them to private schools will slowly deplete the existence of the very schools that I spent 25 of my 30 years teaching in. When the funds are taken away, that does not excuse the public schools from continuing to educate the students who are still there. Loss of highly valuable services that schools in Omaha severely need, not to mention increased class sizes, outdated books, lack of the very supplies at the elementary level, the inability to hire and retain highly qualified teachers and paraprofessionals. Special education services that are required by law will be greatly reduced to go along with the education not being fully funded by the federal nor state government as we speak. There are state statutes that require educators to provide curriculum in the areas of reading, writing, mathematics, science, social studies, multicultural education, character education, financial literacy. Okay, I'll go back to the state statute part. Okay, reading, writing, mathematics, science, and social studies, multicultural education program, character education, and financial literacy. I know of young people whose parents made the choice to put their young people in private schools only to learn that their academic ability or behavior was not up to par for the private schools, and they were dismissed from that school. No funds were returned from tuition already paid. In closing, I would like to see the state legislature address the issue of non-participating parents to enable all teachers and students to have a conducive learning environment so all students can achieve and receive a highly valuable education. Thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Father Korth, you didn't put if you wanted to testify or not. Are you wanting to testify? No? Okay. All right, next, Jenny Benson. No? Okay. Next, Molly Gross.
It's Molly Gross, MOLLYGROSS. Good evening. My name is Molly Gross, and I'm a public school graduate, and my husband and I have raised 4 public school kids, 2 of whom had IEPs. We chose to stay in the state of Nebraska because of the excellent public education this state provides. I am also the legislative chair for the Nebraska Parent-Teacher Association. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I am here to voice my support in repealing the Ballot Measure 435. Our collective voices of parents, educators, and community members are more important than ever in advocating for the well-being and the future of Nebraska's children, all of them. PTA is the largest and oldest child advocacy group in the country. The National PTA's mission is to make every child's potential a reality by engaging and empowering families and communities to advocate for all children. With this in mind, we must stand together against policies that limit opportunities and harm our students. LB 1402 is one such law that does not align with these values. And repealing it is essential to safeguard the educational future of Nebraska's youth. It has taken 2 years and 2 successful petition drives totaling over 200,000 signatures from Nebraskans to ensure that voters would have their voices heard on the issue of using public dollars for private schools. LB 1402 inappropriately diverts public funds to private institutions that do not serve all children. It undermines efforts to ensure that students, regardless of their background or circumstances, have access to a quality education, proper mental health support, and equitable resources. This law creates additional barriers to the well-rounded educational experience that National PTA consistently advocates for. LB 1402 lacks the transparency and accountability standard that public schools are held to. Private and religious schools are not held to this standard. Additionally, they are not required to welcome all students, including ones of different races, faiths, LGBT students, students with IEPs, and students learning English as a second language. Keep in mind that 90% of all Nebraska students attend public schools. LB 1402 will cost taxpayers the minimum of $100 million over the next decade. This will ultimately lead to funding cuts for public schools. We must invest in public schools, working together to address teacher and paraprofessional shortages, reducing class sizes, making improvements in programs and additional curriculum for our students to thrive and succeed. In closing, I ask that you join us in supporting the repeal vote on Ballot Measure 435. By doing so, we are advocating for the best possible future for our children, ensuring that education remains the path to success for every child in Nebraska. Our children are watching. They're counting on us. We can't let them down. Thank you.
We have exhausted the list of opponents. I have one last proponent, and then I will one last shot in the audience if anybody would still like to testify. My last assigned in testifier, Joyce Vondrasek.
Evening, Joyce Vondrasek, Joyce Vondrasek. I'm reading Black Reconstruction by W.E.B. Du Bois right now, and I just read something spoken by a Black state senator in Georgia or something, and he was requesting that the brand new public schools being created after the Civil War not be integrated. He was specifically requesting separate schools for Black people and separate schools for white people. And it just made me appreciate the nuance that's required to talk about public education in this country and all of the critical thinking skills that are necessary to sift through everything that our leaders are saying about these different issues. And I want to say specifically something about what one thing Senator Kauth mentioned earlier in her statement, which was a statement about how people within OPS or the state public schools in general were given an opportunity to vote on things to make the schools better, and they chose not to. Since the Civil War and Reconstruction, when public schools were first instituted through Jim Crow and then through redlining in the last century, there has been a concerted effort by groups of people in this country to undermine public education, specifically with racist and Christian nationalist ideology. And I think that when Senator Kauth says that people in this district were given an opportunity to vote to improve their conditions and they chose not to, that's just an illogical nonsense statement that I could pull out of the words of any racist opponents to public education throughout the history of this country that has been echoed through time against public schools in general. And I want to condemn her words as racist specifically. That being said, I went to a private school from preschool through 8th grade, and it was a horrible education that did not prepare me for high school or college. I think that, like I said, we've only just begun to institute public schools in a way and actually try to make them work. And there are still people today with their privilege and class status trying to undermine public schools for their own personal benefit. And I think that's despicable. And finally, I just want to call into question the nature of this meeting itself. I understand that we are here to fulfill the Open Meetings Act, to have public comments and things like that. But given the Secretary of State's recent comments about the medical marijuana ballot initiatives, in which he suggested that he and Attorney General Mike Hilgers might simply invalidate the law, even if it passes, calls into question why I'm even here speaking to your office in the first place. Why should I trust your office to uphold the rule of law and democracy in general when the Secretary of State is openly calling for himself to have more of authority on what laws get passed into law than everyone here who's testifying you for or against. I have no trust that your office will not do the exact same thing to this ballot initiative for public schools if it passes. Will the Secretary of State just call into question some unknown number of votes from some corner of the state and say, oops, we can't have this law either? What's to stop him from doing that now that he's opened that door? This entire process is embarrassing, and the Secretary of State has embarrassed himself. And in my opinion, he has spit in the face of not just every single voter in the state of Nebraska, but every single person who has spoken up, fought, bled, and died for the right to vote throughout the entirety of human history, prying the right to vote from the cold, dead hands of monarchs and capitalists alike. And I do not appreciate having to come here and say these things. And I really think that Bob Evans should resign his position because he is a disgrace. Thank you.
That has exhausted all of the proponent and opponent sign-ins. Is there anyone else in the audience that didn't get a chance to sign in that would like to speak at this time? All right, with that, we will now go to closing comments. And now I'd like to invite Tim Royers back for the proponents. And as a reminder, you have up to 10 minutes.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody who came and testified this evening. I want to start by acknowledging some of the arguments that were made during opposition testimony. I think it's important to clarify something very critical about this issue. You heard from the director of a scholarship granting organization. You heard from multiple parents who have received scholarships from a scholarship granting organization. There is absolutely nothing about the repeal of Section 1 of 1402 that is connected to those at all. That program was ended by sections 2 through 7 of Section 1402, which is not up for repeal. And it was the legislature that chose to end that program, not this petition. And again, that's not my commentary. That's lifted straight from the Department of Revenue's website, if you don't believe me. So when we talk about an end to scholarship programs, yes, the people responsible for that are in the room, but it is not me or the other sponsors of this petition. It was the folks in the legislature who decided to terminate that program in favor of Section 1 of 1402, which is what we are looking to repeal. And those scholarships are literally gone in 5 days because of an act of the legislature. So it can't be on us because the election won't have happened in 5 days. In addition, I really sincerely want to thank the testifiers from CUES that talked about all the great work that they do for their students. As earlier testifiers have acknowledged, this is not about a public versus private schools debate. I opened my opening statement by saying the fundamental question we're here to resolve is, should public dollars go to private schools? That's the fundamental question, not a public versus private schools quality debate. However, I do want to highlight what they shared because that also highlights the evidence that I shared in the opening statement. When they described the ways that they serve their students and families, the fundamental problem is that method is not scalable, which is what the research shows in other states like Indiana and Ohio and Louisiana and in other places, is that when you implement vouchers, the elements that allow CUES to serve the students the way that it does goes away because it can't be replicated at a capacity that they think it can under a large-scale voucher program. Additionally, there were remarks by multiple people about how students are denied under option enrollment and specifically in regard to special education. I think it's important to clarify a few things as voters who tune into this use it to determine their decision on the ballot. First of all, a denial decision in option enrollment is based on a per school basis, meaning you as a parent can inquire about the capacity status of a school before making the application. There is no surprise, there is no gotcha. They are openly transparent about whether or not they anticipate having space in the coming school year for additional students. Furthermore, there was an implication by multiple testifiers, including Senator Wayne, that people receiving special education services are specifically targeted for denial under option enrollment. Senator Wayne noted that there's a question on the option enrollment form regarding, Senator Wayne acknowledged that there is a question on the option enrollment form about whether or not you have an IEP. He is correct. However, that was not developed by districts. That was developed as an obligation to serve the law. The law requires that districts ask about the IEP status of a student. Most applicants for option enrollment with special ed services are accepted. And in fact, in countless districts in this state, the percentage of resident students that have an IEP and the percentage of option students that have an IEP are either the same or within 1 or 2 percentage points of each other. And another piece that's important to point out that skews this implication is because districts are legally obligated to ask about a student's IEP during an option enrollment application, if the family never provides the IEP, they have to reject the application to satisfy statutory obligations. And that has to count as a rejection. So if you hear anything about rejection rates in the closing from the opposition, understand that that includes incomplete applications. The fact is, students are not being denied because they have special education. In fact, in some of our most highest needs, low capacity special education programs, there are option enrollment students. You heard also that privatization has flourished in other states. And how could this be? Well, it happens because people who are already exercising the choice to attend a private school are taking advantage of the public subsidy. In Iowa, only 14.5% of recipients previously attended a public school. In Arizona, only 20% previously attended a public school. In Arkansas, only 5% of recipients previously attended a public school. And in Florida, only 13% had previously attended a public school. So the growth in utilization is because they chip away at the initial gatekeeping barriers that come in the early version of the law. Again, all you have to do is look at other states. Other states' programs started off eerily similar to 1402, small in scope, small in cost, purportedly to target low-income families. But within a matter of just a few short years, they rapidly transform to cost 9 figures a year. Again, in Iowa, the average income of a voucher recipient was $128,507, and that's straight from Governor Reynolds' office. In Arizona, only 5% of voucher recipients come from a zip code with a median income under $49,000. So again, this is all part of the playbook. And I'm citing sources and data from other states. I'm quoting testimony from the governor who says the goal of this is to have it be a first step to a multi-hundred-million-dollar program. That's the point of what they are attempting to accomplish. And again, I want to point out that as opponents indicated that this is a civil rights issue, A, you heard from the ACLU tonight who encourages a repeal, and B, the very first person to sign the petition was the president of the Omaha chapter of the NAACP. It is a civil rights issue. But if you believe in the cause of civil rights in the realm of education, you're obligated to vote repeal. And I want to close with the main piece that I emphasized in the opening. None of the opposition testimony indicated that a large-scale voucher program would work. And in every other state that we've seen, what happens is, because again, the successful private schools that exist in the status quo can't replicate their model on a large scale, it opens the door for subpar schools to take advantage of subsidies to get created. And that's what we're seeing in states from Arizona to Louisiana. Louisiana suffered more learning loss after they privatized their school system than they did after Hurricane Katrina. And there was a discussion about how every school that is participating in this would be accredited or approved. There is a massive difference between accreditation and approval. This one piece of paper would make a school approved. That's it. I fill out 13 items on this form and I have an approved school. And by the measure of 1402, they would be eligible to participate and receive public tax dollars. So at the end of the day, there is no evidence to indicate large-scale academic benefits. There is ample evidence to indicate it would trade off resources for our public schools. And at the absolute end of the day, the reason why we have not even had to have this debate until now is because we already have robust public choice through option enrollment, because we believe that parents should have a degree of autonomy in picking their child's school, but it should be done in a publicly accountable way to schools that welcome and serve all and are transparent, not just in budget, but in curriculum and in all aspects of how they serve their kids. Again, at the end of the day, no other action in the legislature matters, because the fundamental question is, should public dollars go to private schools? And if you do not agree with that, and you want to continue in the tradition of Nebraskans rejecting this 3 previous times, make sure you vote repeal on 435 and end Section 1 of LB 1402. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to bring up the recognized opponents, Senator Luann Lanahan.
Good evening. Hi, I am Senator Luann Linehan. I represent Legislative District 39, and I'm here tonight representing 33 state senators who voted for LB 1402. I want to be, LOUANNLINEHAN. I want to be very clear. The education associations have misled and lied to people for 2 years about opportunity scholarships. We are not taking money away from public schools. In 2023, the same time we passed the first scholarship bill, the legislature set aside $1 billion from the general fund to the newly created Public Education Future Fund, $1 billion. $1 billion is 1,000 times 10 million. Second, the state now pays public school districts $1,500 in foundation aid for every student, regardless of their resources. Third, in 2023, the legislature increased special education funding by 100%. Somebody said we didn't. We went from 40% of special education costs to 80%. That one thing costs the state $150 million a year. Somebody mentioned the bill that gave extra money for special ed. That was my bill. A teacher, a current teacher who goes back and gets a special ed certificate now gets $5,000 from the state because we're short on special ed teachers. We did that for several things: math, science, technology. So, in addition to the largest increase in public education funding in 4 decades, not since 1990 has the legislature increased public funding that much, we also increased funding for property taxes paid for public schools. So between TIOSA, which is broken, and I stick up for Senator Cal, we did try to fix it in special session, and people would not, we couldn't get to 33 to fix it. So we have $1 billion in TIOSA funding, $1.1 billion in property tax relief, and another 327. So it's $2.5 billion from the legislature for public schools, and another $2.5 billion from property taxpayers. So you have $5 billion in public money going to public schools. Now I'm going to stop a second and talk about public money. I really need a drink of water. What is public money? Public money is money the state sees fit to take from Nebraska citizens. And about $5.5 billion we take in at the state level. It's not people who send their kids to private school, people who homeschool, they pay taxes too. As a matter of fact, the parents who have kids in private school right now, and I got this from our chairman of appropriations, he's much better at numbers than I am, they paid $45 million in property taxes last year. But they shouldn't get any public money, even though they pay public taxes? I don't know how we can hear again and again tonight that the public schools are accountable when we have public schools that are failing kids in this town. We know they are. We have students in schools in Omaha where the reading proficiency in third grade, well, we have statewide, we have 66% of the students in fourth grade not reading proficiently, statewide. We have schools in Omaha where only 20% of the third graders can read at grade level, where only less than 30% are good at math or proficient at math. Now, I'm going to get to the option enrollment. Everybody says, thank you very much. We've heard again tonight, several times, that we have option enrollment, which gives students in Nebraska all kinds of choices. Here are some facts. 2 years ago, the legislature passed a law for the first time that said public schools have to report to the legislature how many option students get turned away. We got that report about a month ago. Over 300 kids in Nebraska were turned away from public schools because they had an IEP. There are public schools in Nebraska who have voted as a school board not to accept option students with IEPs. They're public votes. They don't take kids with IEPs. Westside got 707 applications for option enrollment. They turned down 350. 89 of the 350 had an IEP. So don't say that they take all kids. They clearly do not. They talked about the Constitution, Nebraska's Constitution. What they're talking about is the Blaine Amendment that was passed early in the last century. It was anti-Catholic, bigoted. It passed in several states. The U.S. Supreme Court has found it unconstitutional in every state school choice program that has taken it to the Supreme Court. That's why the opponents did not take us to court. They know that won't stand up in court. It's already been overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court. They talked about how school choice has hurt public schools in other states. So according to U.S. News, they have a list every year of the best public schools in the nation. Number 1, Florida. Florida has the most robust school choice program in the nation, and it's over 20 years old. So if school choice hurts public schools, how does Florida come up with being number 1? Colorado, they've got their school choice on the ballot right now. They're number 5th in the nation. They have school choice. Virginia, a state I lived in, has school choice. They have private school choice. They have charters. They have public options. They have schools, public schools that you have to be very smart to get into. They're number 10. Nebraska's not in the top 10. So it is unbelievable to me that we have had 2 years of unbelievable and constant lies told to Nebraskans. We're not taking money away from public schools, quite the opposite, just to wrap up. We gave them the largest increase in public funding in 4 decades. We increased special ed funding from 40% to 80%. And even though we increased special ed funding to 80%, they're still turning away kids with IEPs. $10 million, you would have to multiply 10 million by 500 to get to $5 billion. There is no way that this 10 million hurts public schools. Other things that were said tonight, that the program is written so it grows, that is not true. It's $10 million. There is no escalator. That's what will be appropriated, and it's not even appropriated for the next years. I have time. I want to speak to one of Mr. Royer's comments about, I think he doesn't understand, and it's, I don't know that it's been public, so there's reason maybe he wouldn't. The law that was passed last year, it does expire at the end of this month. Over 2,000 kids are going to get scholarships with that law. They're in schools right now. The law that we passed last year, regardless of what happens on election day, is the law today. That $10 million is going to go to kids for scholarships. So if Nebraska decides to repeal this law, you're going to have 5,000 kids in school with scholarships that aren't going to be able to get scholarships the next year. So don't let anybody tell you that passing to repeal 1402 doesn't take scholarships away from kids. It's going to take scholarships away from 5,000 kids. I have never believed, if Nebraskans understood that they're taking hope out of children's hands and out of those children's parents' hands, they're actually taking hope away from them, that they would vote to repeal. They would not. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes today's hearing on Referendum 535. Thank you to all the testifiers. Thank you to the proponents and opponents, and thank you for all of you for joining us this evening. For those of you that submitted written comments to our office, we received 1 comment supporting Referendum 435 and 0 comments supporting Referendum 435. Those comments will be added to the public record. I'd first like to thank Mia Sanderson, who a UNO college student who helped me this weekend so I could let my team rest, as we have a lot to do in the next 9 days. I'd also like to thank my team and the Secretary of State. It was a complete team effort. We did 15 hearings in 11 days, nights, weekends, and even a holiday. And so I appreciate my team getting this all together so we can spend the next 9 days getting the election completed. And finally, again, the reason why we all are here is because all 6 of these initiatives and referendum will be on the ballot on November 5th. So please remember to vote on November 5th or earlier if you so choose. Now only in person at your election office. By mail is now concluded. Your ballot is waiting for you. Please go cast it. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.